Disclaimer. This video is made for entertainment purposes only. All the characters are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. No offense to any tale. No person, religion, or race is intended. 2 years after my wedding, my husband left this world and my life forever. My mother-in-law arranged my marriage to her younger son, who was only 14 years old at the time. I thought I was marrying a child, but when I went to the room on my wedding night, that boy did something that even an adult couldn't have managed. That boy completely overwhelmed me. My name is Shika, and I was considered very beautiful. Everything in my life was going well, and I believed that nothing bad could ever happen to me because I had never wronged anyone. But life unfolds according to destiny. When I was little, my mother passed away. After her death, my father stopped paying much attention to our home and remarried just a few months later. When I turned 18, I started working to support the household. I began tutoring and also managed all the household chores. I thought that since I was the only one earning for the family, my family wouldn't get me married. To them, I was like a servant who also brought in a monthly income of 15,000 rupees, which my stepmother took from me. But one day, to my surprise, my stepmother told me they had found a match for me. I was shocked and thought she might be joking, but she said I should start preparing for my wedding, which was to take place in a month. Hearing this, I was elated because my life was about to take a new turn. I had almost given up hope of ever getting married, thinking my stepmother would never allow it. But when my wedding preparations began, I happily got involved. Before the wedding, I had never seen my husband, and even on the wedding day, I didn't see him because of my shyness and modesty. At my in-laws' home, my husband lived with his mother and a 14-year-old younger brother. On my wedding night, while I was sitting in my room, I saw my husband properly for the first time. He was very kind and respectful towards me, right from the beginning. He told me that his younger brother was like a son to him because their father had passed away when the brother was just 3 years old. Since then, my husband had taken on the role of a father for his younger brother, raising him as his own son, and even sharing his bed with him during childhood. My husband Sanjay asked me to always take care of his brother, Uday. I assured him that he didn't need to worry, and that Uday would be like a younger brother to me as well. That night passed beautifully, and I felt like my life was going to be just as wonderful. One morning, my mother-in-law came into my room and started asking me some strange questions about my first night, which made me feel extremely embarrassed. I began wondering why women behave this way. After that, I sat with my brother-in-law for a while. Shortly after, my mother-in-law entered the room and said, "Get ready properly because the Mu Dikai ceremony will begin today. Many of our relatives will come to see you, so dress well, and whatever money they give you, hand it over to me later." I said, "Okay." My mother-in-law was a traditional woman, but my brother-in-law was very friendly. Initially, he joked around with me, but then he started asking me strange questions. He asked, "What were you and my brother doing in this room?" I replied, "We were talking." Then he said, "But you both went to sleep early. I saw your room lights were off." Hearing this, I was shocked. I thought, does that mean he was outside our room? I began to feel uneasy, wondering if he had overheard us. His words left me feeling very embarrassed, but he continued talking casually, as if it didn't matter to him. I thought I should talk to him less, but then he asked, "Where do you sleep? And where does my brother sleep?" I didn't know how to respond. Then he asked, "Do you both sleep together?" Hearing this, I felt extremely embarrassed. Somehow, I managed to divert the conversation. In the evening, I told my husband about everything his brother had asked me. I said, "It's strange how such a young child has so many questions, especially of this kind. How does he even think about these things?" My husband replied, "I asked you to take care of him, but you've started complaining about him from day one." I said, "I'm not complaining, but a child this age shouldn't have such thoughts." Sanjay said, "At this age, kids are naturally curious, which is why they ask such questions. My brother is very innocent. Instead of pointing out his flaws or weaknesses, you should think about helping him improve. He keeps running after you, calling you Bobby, and you're thinking about him this way." I was surprised by what Sanjay said. and realized he was very emotional about his brother. It didn't take me long to understand that if I wanted to keep my husband happy, I shouldn't say anything bad about his brother in front of him. Otherwise, it would upset him. After that, I made sure not to say anything. Our marriage was only a week old, and my husband was a very romantic, movie-like person. He was so interested in me that he wouldn't leave my side. One day, my mother-in-law was calling me repeatedly in the morning, but my husband wouldn't let me leave his side. He said, "Talk to me, look into my eyes. Haven't you ever watched movies? Just like how the hero and heroine sit together and talk. Stay with me like that." I said, "Your mom is calling me. Maybe there's some work since it's already late in the morning." But my husband wouldn't let me go. And then what I feared happened. I got scolded by my mother-in-law. She said, "You've come into the house and already started making my son dance to your tunes. He doesn't see anyone but you now." I said, "It's not like that. He's just crazy about me. What can I do?" My husband had told me to always take care of his mother and keep her happy. So I did all the household chores properly and never complained. Even if I responded to my mother-in-law, I did so respectfully so she wouldn't get angry. Everything was going well, but before our first anniversary, I received devastating news. My husband had passed away. We were extremely distressed and kept wishing that the news wasn't true. But when the body was brought home, we were utterly shocked. My mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, and all of us were crying uncontrollably. My husband had left this world, and the pain was unbearable for me. I cried so much that my condition deteriorated. My mother-in-law started blaming me, saying, "You've killed my son. Your presence is cursed. Because of you, the heir of this house is gone, my son is gone, and everything is ruined. You're responsible for all of this." I endured these taunts for 2 months, but eventually that phase passed. I started thinking, what's left for me here now? I should go back to my family. Anyway, there was nothing left in my life to make me happy. Among my family, only my father was there for me. My mother was my stepmother. When my stepmother and father came to take me back, my mother-in-law said something that shocked everyone. She declared, "I won't let her go back. She is my son's widow." My father said, "Your son is no longer alive, so what's her purpose here now?" But my mother-in-law argued, "She's the reason my son is gone. There's no one left to earn for this house. I only have one son left, and he's still in school. So, should we starve to death? She will earn for us in my son's place and support this household." My father and stepmother told her that what she was doing was wrong and unfair to me. But my mother-in-law had made up her mind. There was a heated argument between my father and mother-in-law. The conversation went back and forth, and finally, when I was asked what I wanted, it was obvious that I wanted to return home. I felt suffocated in this house. However, my mother-in-law said, "She will not leave this house." My mother-in-law called some relatives who were ready to fight aggressively. Eventually, the decision was made that I could stay in this house only if I remarried. And since there was only one man in the house, they started talking about marrying me to him. Everyone said, "So what if he's younger? This girl isn't that old either." This way, I would remain in the house as their daughter-in-law again. I didn't want any of this, but my mother-in-law convinced my father to agree to this marriage. My stepmother also said, "This is a good thing. If we take her back home, how will it benefit us? Who will search for a match for her again? It's already difficult to find a match for widows. Nowadays, even unmarried girls struggle to find a suitable match. So let her stay here. Society will also talk if a widow gets married again. Why reject this offer and bring her home? Even there, she'll just be called a widow." My stepmother's strange reasoning convinced my father, and they left me there. A few days later, I was married to my brother-in-law, who my late husband used to treat like his son and whom I considered a child. I cried and screamed more about this than I had during my husband's death. But no one listened to me, and my mother-in-law forced the marriage upon me. After the wedding, I refused to go to my brother-in-law's room, but my mother-in-law insisted. She said, "Tonight is your wedding night. If you don't go to his room, something bad will happen again. Do you want to kill my other son too?" Even then, I didn't go. The next day, my mother-in-law told me I had to start working. She gathered many neighborhood children, and I began teaching 40 to 60 kids daily. It was exhausting and mentally draining, especially since I also had to manage all the household chores. A week passed like this. I was terrified of entering my brother-in-law's room. I thought of him as a child, and I felt that this forced relationship was wrong. I wanted him to stay in his room, and I would stay in mine. There was no reason for me to go to his room, but my mother-in-law kept pressuring me. A few days passed like this until one day, I was shocked to hear my brother-in-law himself saying, "Send my wife to my room." However, I knew he was just a child and unaware of these things, which is why he was saying it. It was all new for him, so he was happy. After all, he got married, and that too so quickly. But then I began to think that these thoughts had been in his mind since the first day of my first marriage. I understood that he had a fascination with such things, but he had no idea what a wife truly is. My life had been ruined. There was nothing left for me. One day, I decided that I would run away from this house. It wasn't that hard, but my brother-in-law found out. He said, "Don't worry, I'll help you. Whatever you say, I'll do. You won't have any trouble, and I'll take care of you." He said these things as if he knew exactly what I wanted to hear. I started crying uncontrollably. I didn't want to run away from home either. After all, where would I go if I ran away? If I ran once, I would be branded as someone who ran away from home. I was the daughter of a respectable father. I had lived my entire life with dignity. How could I tarnish my father's name? I cried bitterly and went back to my husband. But I didn't want such a husband. I didn't feel like calling him my husband. The next morning, my mother-in-law found out about everything, but my brother-in-law handled everything. Otherwise, I would have been scolded badly, and I didn't want that. Afterward, my mother-in-law started making a fuss. She said, "Today, you'll go to my son's room. You've made a spectacle of yourself. You're his wife. If a husband and wife don't live together, what's the point of being married? This is not good at all." That evening, my mother-in-law forcibly dressed me up as a bride again and sent me to the room. For a moment, I thought of locking the door from inside, but I couldn't do it because my mother-in-law had already opened the door. After a while, my brother-in-law came into the room. I thought, he's just a kid. I'll scare him and make him sleep. I'm worrying unnecessarily. This way, my mother-in-law would be happy, and I would be at peace. Nobody would know what's happening inside the room. I started wondering why this thought hadn't occurred to me before. When my brother-in-law entered the room, he said, "You look very beautiful," I replied. "All right, now go to sleep." I began removing my makeup and jewelry. He said, "You look so good." I said, "Whether I'm good or bad is none of your business." I scolded him, saying, "Shut up and go to sleep." But he was looking at me in a way no one had ever looked at me before. I asked, "Why are you staring at me? Go to sleep quietly." I was still trying to intimidate him, but inside, I was scared. After a while, he grabbed my hand and slapped me across the face. I was shocked. He said, "Don't you know how to talk to your husband? You're yelling at me, you foolish woman." I said, "You're not even mature enough, and you're trying to act like my husband? You're not my husband. What's your age anyway?" He said, "I liked you from the very first day. Do you know what I had to do to get you? I had to kill my brother, who was like a father to me, because I wanted to have you." Hearing this, my soul trembled. It meant my husband was murdered. He said, "I tampered with my brother's car brakes, which caused the accident, and everyone thought it was an unfortunate incident." My world turned upside down. The person I thought was just a kid had carefully planned and killed my husband, who loved him dearly, to claim me as his own. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run away and scream. But before I could do anything, he grabbed my hand, pulled me toward him, and tried to force himself on me. But by now, I hated even the sight of him. I pushed him away hard and ran out of the room, screaming and shouting. I revealed everything to everyone, but no one believed me. My brother-in-law also called me a liar in front of everyone. He claimed that I didn't consider him my husband, so I was accusing him falsely. I had no other option left, so I tried to commit suicide, but even that wasn't allowed. However, I had decided that I would ensure my husband's killer was punished no matter what. A few days later, I found out I was pregnant. Now I wanted to live for my child. Quietly, I started collecting evidence against my brother-in-law. Once I had enough, I handed it over to the police. My brother-in-law was arrested, and a few months later, he was convicted and sent to jail. This shock was too much for my mother-in-law to handle, and she passed away. Now I live with my son and support myself by tutoring children. I never imagined my life would turn out like this. I still miss my first husband deeply. If only he were alive today.